Hello, everyone. Thank you for spending time with us today and taking time out of your schedule to listen in on this Residential Plan 2 Land Use Study work session. My name is Jared Schneider with Kimley Horn Associates, and this study is jointly funded through the Hillsborough Planning Commission and Hillsborough County. So to provide an agenda for this virtual workshop, we've got a presentation that we're going to go over and really four main items we want to talk about. We want to do a recap of the RP-2 study area. And some of you may have heard this at our open house on March 11th. We'll do a brief recap. I want to talk about a summary of what we've heard through our public engagement thus far and dive into some of the initial recommendations as well as next steps. After the presentation, we have a link on the website for you to take a survey, and we'll provide that link to you here in this presentation as well. As a little background, a moratorium was enacted December 4th, 2019 for 270 days to be lifted August 30th this year. And really this, I like the quotes on the right. It gives us a chance to kind of revisit policies and zoning in the area, as well as to better understand what people want to see. The purpose of the study is to evaluate the current residential Plan 2 regulations and policies, see what's working and what may not be working, and identify potential changes. Infrastructure is also a big topic in the area, and so we're also looking at infrastructure needs within the area. What you're seeing here is a schedule for the project. As I mentioned, we started in February of this year, and it runs through the end of May. In the red circle, you'll see where we are today. We had our first open house on March 11th and had an online survey. We're developing initial recommendations through end of April and working our way through May on recommendations to the policies by the end of May 29th. And then staff updates will be made through May to August on the RP-2 potential changes. What this map is showing is our study area. In orange is our RP-2 study area, and then there's other additional RP-2 focus areas within the yellow. So what is residential planned? It's an area that has an agricultural history, but also residential development in the area. And it's an area, if you have at least 160 acres, one can develop up to 2 dwelling units per acre and possibly more, up to 4 dwelling units per acre based on certain conditions. If you have less than 160 acres, then you can do up to 1 dwelling unit per 5 acres. It's also, the resulting pattern is that you have an area that you may have such things as agriculture, residential, and suburban scale development. One of the things we've talked about in the past is the amount of growth that's occurring in the county. It's projected over the next 30 years, over 700,000 more people will be moving to Hillsborough County. So it's really starting to talk about how many more people do we want? How many more people should go into RP-2 areas? This gets us into a discussion of what's in the area today. So this map's showing the existing zoning. Over 80% of the area is agriculture with some planned development. It does not include all the additional permitted projects out there. A big topic is preserving the land that's out there. So the environmental lands, acquisition and protection lands, those include areas that have been preserved, and you can see that on this map. So there's some areas that have been preserved. This map shows in the green boxes projects that have been approved. Projects in the purple are pending. And then the projects in the red outlines identify projects that have been denied in the past. So the point here is things are changing in the area, and that's why we're doing this study. So now we're going to transition to what we've heard through the open house that was held on March 11th and the first survey, as well as stakeholder interviews. Thank you everyone who came to the first open house that was held on March 11th. We had over 60 attendees. And what we did was we provided a brief presentation and then had 3 interactive stations to get as much feedback as possible. What you're seeing here is a summary of one of our interactive exercises. On the left, we asked folks, explain the area today. What are you seeing out there? And we had some of the top responses. So the larger the words, the more responses we received. So we have rural, poor infrastructure, congestion, overcrowded. Those came up time and time again. And on the right, again, this is a word cloud. The bigger the words, the more responses we had. So we asked the vision for the area, and we've got, you know, more infrastructure, desire to preserve land, and see less development. Similarly, we did an exercise where we asked main themes. And on the left, you'll see we asked, what would you like to see more of? And you get things like farming, agriculture, infrastructure, general roadway improvements. On the right, we said, what would you like to see less of? And we got development, suburban, retail, commercial, cluster development came up. So these are the main themes that we saw. Another exercise we did is a mapping exercise. Everyone loves to look at maps, right? And we had some good discussions. So what we had were different colored dots for what people wanted to see or what they didn't want to see, change or no change. And we had different themes, so residential, employment, shopping, parks, roadways. And what we saw is really the bomb preserved, or folks wanted to see bomb preserved, or roadway improvements, drainage, water improvements. There was some desire for commercial and residential in the bomb area. So we had 4 different areas, same map that folks could put their input on. It was just so that we wouldn't get overcrowding. And all these maps are on the Planning Commission's website. So now we'll show you a couple other examples. Again, this is another example with a lot of the same themes. And this is a third example. And what you're seeing here is the 4th and final map. Again, go out to the Planning Commission website. There's a summary of the first open house if you'd like to see more. So now moving on, we're going to transition to the online survey that ran from March 11th through April 2nd. We had 179 total participants, majority of which were owners or renters in a property in the area. One of the questions we asked participants is imagining the future of the area, and got some similar responses of reduced urban sprawl, additional infrastructure in the area. And so this is kind of a listing of some of the main themes out there. Another question we asked is, what do you think is essential for the area's future? So again, seeing some similar themes, strongly agree. We got 80% for roadway widenings. Another one up there is preserving the rural character, and then clustering was looked at as strongly disagree or disagree. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. This next question was focused on transportation and widening existing roadways, and repaving or maintenance improvements to existing roadways were the top 2 choices. On this one, we asked folks to provide more information on transportation challenges that weren't identified in the previous question. Some of the big responses we heard were lowering speed limits in the area. Had a lot of conversations on that in the open house as well. And then also talking about the roads lacking shoulders, and building roads before development occurs. This next question got into specific areas for transportation improvements, and Big Bend Road popped up to the top, as well as 672 or County Road 672 and US 301. And there's some additional roadways identified there as well. Also, the one on the right, the question was really trying to understand if people are using other transportation modes, and for the most part, folks are driving alone in the area. This question got into what would you like to see more of in the area, and again, a lot of these questions are reinforcing the same themes that we're trying to get to, and green space, parks, agriculture pop to the top, as well as retail. We also asked, do you want to see employment close to where you live? And that was a 50-50 split. We also asked what could be improved. So protection of wildlife habitats came to the top, and discouraging suburban development is up there at the top with over 70%, as well as infrastructure and encouraging farming. We asked, what do you like most about your community, rural feeling, green space and trails were some of the top ones up there. There was also some mention of kind of the country living, but chain restaurants and shopping centers, and choices for retail popped up there. Examples of communities or neighborhoods. There was a mixture there. There was Fishhawk, rural, West Chase was mentioned, Bomb as is. So there's quite a number of options or selections there. So one of the things we're currently doing right now is we're having stakeholder phone calls. We've conducted some of those. Some examples with Baum Civic Association, local landowners, as well as members of the development community, getting different perspectives. If you're interested, please reach out to Marian Abrahamson, and her contact information is the back of this presentation. Now we're going to transition into some of the initial recommendations and strategies. As mentioned in the beginning, the schedule, we're going to be developing these through the end of April and on through May. So these will be developed even further. One of the things we've talked a lot about with stakeholders as well as through the public engagement is just clarifying the consistency in the policies. And example of that may be just clarifying commercial requirements and how they should be met with the land development regulations. We'll be getting into more specifics of that as we move on through April and May. Another bigger one that we've heard through the public engagement that we presented today is plan for infrastructure improvements. So one recommendation is to create a mobility plan that lays out what type of roadway improvements we're going to make, when and where, identifying water and sewer improvements and sites for schools, libraries, and parks. Another big topic was, how do we implement additional preservation, open space, encourage farming, whether that's through conservation easements or other means of conservation. How do we protect, encourage farming in available areas? So those are some specific areas we'd like to focus on, and I'll be getting into more details as we move through April and May. So another recommendation is to explore updates to transfers of development rights or TDRs. That is a complex topic, but we've got an example here to show you. On the right, we've got kind of an area with farms on the right of the picture and then more built out areas on the left. And so let's say property A is in that kind of farm area on the right. And so they could have a maximum density of 2 dwelling units per acre. And property B is more in that area with the houses, could have a density of 3 units per acre. Now, property A could transfer its rights to property B, and this would result in property A being preserved and property B having a maximum of 5 dwelling units. Another recommendation we want to get your feedback on in the survey questions is do we encourage different levels of density in different areas of RP2? So for example, could we have greater density in Triple Creek area or areas north of Baum? Or in Baum, the area in orange over here, could that differ and have less density than the areas in the yellow? Another recommendation is to revise the commercial requirements, and we've got a question on that one, and want to get your feedback on how you feel about having commercial internal or external to the site, and concentrating on different nodes of development. And we also want to provide opportunities and locations for local business in the BOM area based on the market analysis. One of the biggest topics has been clustering, and we want to help clarify our recommendations or to clarify clustering. The planned village concept was really to look at a way to identify how do you cluster residential and commercial uses in a development and preserve farmland. And really felt like from what we've been hearing, that hasn't been working for a lot of the residents, and the concern has been on suburban subdivisions with smaller lots not meeting the intent of the area. So we understand it needs to be carefully planned, or planned developments need to be carefully planned in the rural areas. So we want to clarify and look at cluster development in greater detail. So here's an example of how you could develop out 128 units. This is a square mile here as an example. So you could do that with large lots, with equally spaced large lots. Or you could do different lot sizes with some clustering in some areas. You could have half acre to acre or more properties, and again, even some clustering going on. Or you can preserve 3/4 of the land and do a range of housing units, but smaller clustered units in this example. And one of the things that we want to dive into, you have the existing landscape on the left. Again, here's the second one is large lot neighborhood. So you could have large lots spread out throughout the area with limited preservation. Or you could do a conservation neighborhood where you have still large lots. They're more compact development or clustered in a way. They're not the small suburban, smaller lots, but you preserve more land that way for farming or preservation. And on the right, you have an example of kind of the typical suburban style development where you have smaller lots clustered together with some land preserved and more internally. So this really tries to pull it all together, the last few slides graphics that we've been showing, and we understand again the concern on clustering and the style of development may not be meeting the intent. So really trying to show there's some different examples of what could be compact or cluster development. So you got the existing landscape that's out there, and some homes on existing former farms. You may or may not be able to maintain that. Where there's permitted development, there's the large lot neighborhoods that we talked about with homes spread out on larger lots. Conservation neighborhoods or agricultural neighborhoods, that's been done in other areas. It's been talked about a little bit more recently around the country of doing different size lots and preserving more of the land. There's the typical suburban development that's clustered together with smaller lots. And then the planned village concept, and it kind of overlaps with some of these topics like the conservation neighborhoods to a degree, where you may have a mix of uses with lands surrounding it conserved or preserved. Lastly, we want to hit on the next steps. Again, our end product is to have a draft set of policies by the end of April, and there'll be more opportunities for the public at our virtual open house with more refined and detailed recommendations there at the end of April. So again, thanks for being patient and listening through. Really want to get your feedback on some of the initial concepts that'll help us refine and direct towards the end of April, or direct the recommendations. And then we'll be moving through policy recommendations or revisions, updates to the end of May, with more opportunity for public outreach and comments, and then finalizing policy revisions through June and August. So the point is there's going to be a lot more opportunity to touch base, and we really appreciate your patience and being involved in this process. Thank you so much. So now that you've listened to the presentation, I really appreciate your time on that. please go take the survey that's on the Planning Commission website at this link. We're really looking for, again, some thoughts and comments on these initial recommendations. And I know we've heard some thoughts already through the stakeholder meetings and the public engagement, but this will help us to develop the recommendations even further. And again, thank you so much for your time.